Hello, bienvenidos everybody. Welcome to our event, Framing the Narrative on Environmental Justice and the Climate Crisis. And I see there are people hailing from all different parts of New Jersey and the country. And we'd love if you take a minute to tell us who you are in the chat by sharing your name, affiliation, and location. Also, feel free to tell us what interests you about this issue. So my name is Vanessa Maria Graber, and I'm the News Voices Director at Free Press, a national media advocacy organization fighting to give people a voice in the crucial decisions that shape our media. I am also a journalist, an adjunct professor at Stockton University. We organized this event with our colleagues in partnership with the Center for Cooperative Media, the New Jersey League of Conservation Voters, and the New Jersey Progressive Energy Coalition. We also want to thank all of the panelists who are volunteering their time today to join us for this important conversation. The News Voices project that I manage is a project that organizes communities, journalists, and newsrooms to build power and advocate for the news, information, and narratives that people need to thrive. We do this by collectively dreaming up new media futures, addressing media harms, designing equitable engagement strategies, building power with communities, and advocating for journalism repair and transformation. We also train and support journalists and organizers around the country who want stronger local journalism infrastructure. And to that end, we anchor the New Jersey Community Media Collective, which includes our partners at Stories of Atlantic City, the Trenton Journal, Five Words Media, and the Bloomfield Information Co-op. A few months ago, when we saw record flooding, tornadoes, and dangerous smoke filling the air in New Jersey, we came together to ask the question, what if journalists came together with policymakers around climate issues and worked together to better inform the public about what's going on? And that is how we dreamed up this event. In order to better understand how we can report on these issues, understand the impacts, especially in regards to environmental racism and communities of color, and collaborate to reframe these narratives in media. As you know, our media shapes the public discourse about climate issues and provides life-saving information during climate-related emergencies. Organizers and policymakers play an important role in providing journalists and the media with accurate information on how to respond to it. In this interactive two-part discussion, you'll hear from environmental justice policymakers and journalists who are knowledgeable about water and air quality issues, flooding, natural disasters, and how environmental racism impacts the health of New Jerseyans across the state. And this is especially timely given the mandate from the newly published report from the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which calls for more aggressive action to combat the climate crisis. This report says that the world is on pace to blow past a critical global heating threshold by the early 2030s, unless nations take immediate and dramatic steps to mitigate the climate catastrophe. The UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said the planet is on course to warm by an average of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels within a decade, causing irreversible damage to human populations and ecosystems. The report also warns of worsening heat waves, flooding, drought, rising sea levels, famine, mass extinction, and the spread of infectious diseases. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said a livable future for all is still possible if nations take urgent action. He went on to say the 1.5 degree limit is achievable, but it will take a quantum leap in climate action. This report is a clarion call to massively fast-track climate efforts by every country and every sector on every time frame. In short, he said, our world needs climate action on all fronts, everything, everywhere, all at once. In addition to that report, now the World Meteorological Organization and Copernicus, a European climate observation agency, announced recently that July is extremely likely to be the hottest month ever recorded. This prompted the Secretary General to say, the era of global warming has ended, the era of global boiling has arrived, which he declared at a speech at the UN headquarters last week in New York. Though we understand that carbon emission from fossil fuels plays a big part in the conversation around environmental issues, we also want to discuss air, water, and land quality concerns that arise from pollution, toxic dumping, contamination, and spills from bad actors that negatively affect the health of our communities. These stories are equally as important to hold in the larger conversation around the health and well-being of New Jerseyans and the role that environmental racism plays and how this pollution disproportionately affects communities of color. So we are heeding the warnings of the IPCC and other climate scientists and want to do our part to provide a forum to talk through how we can clearly communicate to the public what is happening, provide useful information on how to prepare, amplify people's stories who are most impacted, and find ways to work together to hold our government accountable. Panelists at this event will share information about the policy solutions being considered to combat the crisis and discuss how journalists can be a force for good amid these changes. We thank you for joining us today. And now I want to pass the mic to our friends at the Center for Cooperative Media to tell you a little bit about their organization and work.
Hey, everybody. So my name is Joe Amditis. I am Assistant Director of Products and Events at the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University. I'm also running the tech behind the scenes here today. So if you do have any issues or if you're having some trouble with Zoom, please just send me a DM in the Zoom chat. I will just make sure that you are sending it to the correct person. And likewise, if you're sending a DM and you don't mean to send it to everyone, make sure you double check that as well. We've got a great show for you today, essentially. And the center is excited to be a part of this. When Vanessa reached out to us and talked about this idea, we jumped on it immediately. This is very important to us. And it also fits really nicely in the theme of the sort of not your same old sources series that we have been running, as we're calling it, which in addition to attempting to expand the vocabulary and the narrative choices for journalists, we also want to make sure that the sources that are cited and that are featured in your reporting is also as diverse as the state that you are representing and that you're covering. And so to that end, we have our New Jersey Diverse Sources database, which you can find at diversesourcesnj.com. That's in partnership with NJ.com, who is helping to co-sponsor this. And I put the link to that in the chat. We'll also be sending around a PDF that we've put together of 12 sources and experts from a wide range of backgrounds that you all are encouraged to reach out to and feature if you are reporting on this issue. And then Vanessa, you said I'm supposed to turn it over to who again after this, my bad?
Yes, so we're going to turn it over to James, who's going to talk about NJPEEC and NJ conservation of voters. New Jersey conservation. You say it, James.
There you go. New Jersey League of Conservation Voters.
New Jersey League of Conservation Voters, Vanessa. Thank you, Vanessa, for that introduction. Also, Joe as well. Again, everyone, good afternoon. It's 12:10, so I can say good afternoon. My name is James Thompson. I'm the campaigns director for the New Jersey League of Conservation Voters. For those of you who don't know who we are, or have had limited interaction with us, we're the statewide political voice for the environment, one of the political voices for the environment. We elect environmentally responsible candidates to start to state and local official offices, advocate for strong environmental policies, and hold our elected officials accountable to safeguard the health of our communities, the beauty of our state, and the strength of our economy. You can find more information about the work that we do on our website, which is njlcb.org. We are going to be starting a panel today with several voices within the state of New Jersey, 3 panelists that I would like to introduce and give them an opportunity to introduce themselves, and then we'll just go ahead and get things on the road. But we have Anjuli Ramos from Sierra Club, New Jersey, who is the state director. We also have Marcus Sibley, the chair of NJPEEC. And then we also have, welcome to all of the panelists who are here. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to take the opportunity to talk about where we are with our environment here in New Jersey, as well as environmental justice and climate change as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start off and ask the first question. The question is open for anyone in particular who wants to answer, but Anjuli, I want to see if you want to start off to try to tackle this question as well. What do you see as the greatest threat to New Jersey communities overall as it relates to our environment and in the protection of clean air, clean water, and open space?
Can everybody hear me? I'm going to apologize to everybody. My voice is a little bit shot, so I'm going to work very hard so you can all hear me. Good afternoon, everybody. Anjuli, Ramos, New Jersey Sierra Club. Thank you, James, for that question. So you know, in our work, like Marcus, Nicole, and all of us, right? We think every day about how can we best protect New Jersey? How can we move New Jersey forward? And we're constantly thinking of the challenges. And, you know, in addition of like climate change, and as Vanessa mentioned, you know, all the data and all of the information that we know of how we're being directly impacted, and everything that we're doing from an advocacy perspective and a government perspective to push forward, you know, transitioning away from fossil fuels and going into better environmental protection, better protection of our own communities. I think how I see this is that we're entering into a time where protections and regulations are no longer what's going to do it, right? Like there is a certain amount of control that we can have over our environment, but the impacts of climate change, as we've seen this summer, it's really in our faces and a little bit out of control. So for example, we can try to regulate our air quality and we try to do the best possible thing we can. But as we've witnessed this summer with the unprecedented fires in Canada, you know, our entire air quality for days, if not weeks, have been jeopardized. Our health has been jeopardized for something that is completely outside of our control. So we are fighting very hard. A lot of people are fighting very hard for better environmental protection, to steer away from fossil fuels and to go into a cleaner sources of energy. But in addition to that, we face the challenge of the uncontrollable, and that is warming temperatures in our oceans and the impacts that that has to that ecosystem and wildlife and different species, you know, on land as well. There is uncontrollable impacts to our air quality because of fires, and many other different things that are happening in terms of climate change. And it also impacts water, right? Because we are getting stronger storms, more like frequent storms. And so how does that jeopardize our water infrastructure, right? And so we're trying to renovate these. We're trying to get a hold of this. We're trying to deal with the sea level rise, but at the same time, these are things that we have no control over. And so to me, it's like, what can we do as urgently as possible so that we are then left with the uncontrollable and so that we can deal with that? I think that's the biggest threat for everybody.
Thank you, Anjuli. Would any of the other panelists, Nicole or Marcus, want to expand?
Come on, James, you already know. I have.
Of course I know. We just have to spread the word and make sure everyone else knows.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Miller. I'm principal consultant of MnM Consulting, also vice chair of NJPEEC, the New Jersey Progressive Equitable Energy Coalition. I think that I agree with everything that Anjuli said. Of course, I'm in lockstep with my sister, but for me, the greatest threat is general apathy to the coming climate chaos, and also the very mistaken belief that we can continue the status quo and have things remain the same. That is just not true. And we've been telling ourselves a lie. Oh, EVs will save us. Oh, we can just put hydrogen in the existing gas pipes. These are not solutions. And unfortunately, they're untested, they're unproven, and they are also ignoring the ways in which we've separated ourselves as communities, the ways in which we've damaged our ecosystem and our environment to create those uncontrollable realities that we're now facing. And unfortunately, people either they fall in one of two camps. Oh, there's nothing we can do about it. We're all going to die. Or it's not happening. I'm going to bury my head in the sand. And neither of those are acceptable solutions.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. Marcus, would you like to expand on that, or I can move to the next question if that's okay?
No, I mean, we can go to the next question because my answer is going to be essentially the same to the next question. So we can move on to the next one.
Sure. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit to talk more specifically about BIPOC communities, environmental justice. So what do you believe are some of the most important issues facing environmental justice communities here in New Jersey? And how has the existing news coverage been regarding those issues and topics relating to communities, BIPOC communities in New Jersey?
I'm sorry, can you repeat? It broke out toward the end. Could you repeat the question again, James?
what do you believe are some of the most important issues facing environmental justice communities in New Jersey? And how has existing news coverage been in regards to the issues and topics that are important in environmental justice communities and brown and Black communities as well?
Okay, now I have it. And good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to people outside of our region. Thank you all for joining today. To answer that question, I think the biggest problem that we have, especially for our Black and brown community, is that people see this as a Black and brown community problem. That is the problem. Just because something affects a community worse than first, that doesn't mean it's only their problem. So one of the issues that we have is an analogy I'm going to use is like if we're at war. Let's just say James, Nicole, Anjuli, and I, and Vanessa are at war, and we're in the midst of a war, and it's bullets flying all over the place. And then I see Karen and Meg and Dee and David and Alicia show up. If I'm leaning over them and saying, hey, where have you been the whole time? Should I focus on that? Or should I focus on the fact that I now have support and I want them to get in and help me fight this war? And I think that's kind of the problem that we have with environmental justice, that we forget we're at war. We need all the soldiers we can get. We need to make sure we're inclusive. But in the process of being inclusive, we have to ensure that every partner that comes to the table recognizes why we're here, recognizing the environmental racism, the systemic racism, the overt racist practices that are embedded in our laws. Everyone needs to be aware of how we got here, so that once we come to the table, we all are cognizant of why we must do certain work, why we have to be intentional about fixing things in the Black community and the brown community because of the historic impacts. But we need to be welcoming, let people in so we can win this war. So to me, James, the biggest issue that we're going to be facing is we don't have enough soldiers. So we have to continue to bring more people to the forefront of this fight so that we can win the fight. Because I don't want to keep doing awareness. I'll be honest with you. I'm a very busy person. I do a lot of webinars. I'm kind of okay with awareness. I think people are well aware of what the problem is. We need more people stepping into this space and doing the intentional work to ensure that we stop what's happening. It's enough. We know what's happening. We know why certain facilities are put in certain communities. We know why information about what's coming to these communities, they don't do a good job of making sure the community knows about it. We know that. We know the intentions. Now, what's that next step? What are we going to do differently to ensure that we're empowering people to fight for themselves? So we're not just saying, hey, I was there, who cares? Let's be honest about that. I don't care if you were there. Who did you bring? Who did you inspire to be there with you? Because you being there is not enough. And we have to internalize that us alone isn't enough. We need to build a formidable opponent, because anytime there's money and racism involved, it's going to be a tough war. And that is exactly what's involved in environmental justice, money and racism.
Thank you for that, Marcus. I take what you said as a challenge, right? And I will continue to take that as a challenge. I consider that as a challenge for everybody that's in this meeting and in this webinar. Would anybody, either Anjuli or Nicole, like to respond to that?
You know, I generally try to stay away from militaristic analogies, but just carrying on the sort of like being at war theme, the idea that we're at war, you know, when we think, okay, your question was about sort of how it affects BIPOC communities and how the media has portrayed those realities. Unfortunately, what happens, as Marcus has said, you know, there are no silos. All of our borders are imaginary lines, right? And so things are that smoke that Anjuli was mentioning came from Canada, across international and state borders to land here in front of me in New Jersey, and then carried on down the coast. And so there are no silos on these issues, and there are no real borders separating us. So the pollution, the problems, they start, the BIPOC communities are often canaries in the coal mine. Our Black, Brown, Indigenous communities are the ones who get hit first. But trust me, PFAS is coming for your affluent communities. They might have started in your Black and brown communities where those racist plants were posted because nobody was going to say no to them, because nobody was going to care about what happened to those communities. But guess what? Water flows, and now those contaminants, now those toxins are reaching into our affluent communities, and suddenly they're a problem. And so what we really have to realize is what is the combination of concerns that we have. So I love here in Newark, we were the first municipality to have a cumulative impacts ordinance, and New Jersey followed suit as the first state in the nation to have a cumulative impacts law, which is currently being fought by people who don't think that we need to have environmental justice protections. But that's a whole nother panel. And so when we have advocates who are working to make sure that a town that has an international airport, and that has the largest port on the East Coast, and that also has massive truck and railroad lines, and also has incredible air quality concerns, has four EPA Superfund sites, that has brownfields just as far as the eye can see, that where you can't plant into the ground. These are the cumulative impacts that the people in our frontline communities are dealing with on a daily basis, and they will not stay here. Those toxins will spread. And so when we try to have those protections that Anjuli is talking about, we need our media to do their due diligence and research, and not say, oh, we're presenting both sides, when truthfully you're getting a very well-funded opposition press release and an advocate sort of screaming their heart out at you. And considering that those are very similar, we need our press to do their due diligence, to be curious, to be skeptical, and to say, hey, what's the truth here? What can I find out about the truth about how electric vehicles are going to affect our community? What's the truth about incineration and waste, and how we deal with waste in this country? So there's many topics, there are no silos, and we need to work together. I saw Anjuli came off mute, so I'm like, I'm ready.
James, can I jump in?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, can I
Nicole,
follow
you're
up too?
You
Marcus,
guys,
you're the queue, but Anjali's next.
you guys are speaking to my heart. I'm feeling it. Nicole, you just hit on so many things that I want to comment. 100% agree. Biggest threat to our EJ communities is the cumulative impacts. Agree 100%, Nicole, that it starts there. So those communities are absolutely experiencing the worst and the highest concentrations of pollution. But the pollution continues to travel through water, through air, as Nicole was just saying. Nicole, the only different thing that I'm going to say from what you said about PFAS is that PFAS has made it to the affluent communities already. It's not getting there. It's already there. PFAS is not even a statewide problem. It's a global problem. It's found everywhere, including the Arctic. So we all have to deal with these problems that are killing us collectively, without divisions, without silos. I agree on that 100%, Marcus. And so I wanted to add more on the coverage and the press on EJ issues. Nicole, to what you were saying about, electric vehicles and electrification, and advocates screaming our heart out to the media, please cover our message. We are coming from a place where we are not only fighting for environmental protection, we are also fighting for justice. We are fighting for those communities that have been marginalized for decades and decades to be better protected. So if we're telling you something, it's because we have science and data to back it up. We are not coming up with lies and misinformation just so we get away with our great agenda of environmental protection. Here are we, like the despicable environmentalists, right? We are here to try to protect our environment and our communities. And so one of the things that I've noticed lately with coverage, James, is that let's just talk about electrification, for example, because that's a hot topic here in the state. Electrification of our indoor spaces is convenient and beneficial to everybody, particularly our EJ communities, right? And so there has been so much coverage about, well, they say it's going to come here and take your stove away, your gas stove away, and just talking about numbers that have no basis. Like, this is going to cost millions of dollars. Where is that coming from? Where is the data to back it up? Yet it's being covered. Yet it's being, cited article after article after article. And then at the end of that same article, there's a quote by like me or Nicole or Marcus that says, but environmental advocates says that this is a good idea and it's a good plan. And it's just a quote. But on the other hand, we are providing the studies, the reports, the really thorough work of understanding how this is pushing and moving us forward into better protection and better taking care of our communities. And I feel like the press overall doesn't take the time to fact check the really crazy numbers that, people in opposition to these things are coming up with. But then they don't also give the space and amplify the numbers and the information that we're providing that is really, really well studied with a lot of work behind it. So that's my take, Marcus.
Yeah, perfect. And I'm so honored to be on this panel with everyone today, and grateful to hear later from journalists that we get to work with all the time. But just really quickly, Nicole and I are representatives of NJPEEC. NJPEEC stands for New Jersey Progressive Equitable Energy Coalition. We are a coalition of environmental and social justice advocates from across the state who come together to help people understand the importance of equity in the energy space. Why is that important? Because this is the conversation with our journalists. Many people don't know, they are not aware of the inequities, even in the energy space, even amongst certain groups. This needs to be an ongoing conversation. And so at NJPEEC, we're doing our work, but we absolutely need the assistance of our journalists. We need our publications to create an atmosphere where environmental justice is a conversation. We often are called upon when there's a fire or when there's something happen. It's very reactive, but environmental justice is every day. This is a part of our everyday lives. So I say this to say, I recognize we're in a space where things are driven by clicks. We're in a click world now. So you have to provide content that you feel will get the greatest reaction. Well, here's the reality. The more people know about environmental justice, the more people recognize that this is impacting their communities. As Nicole is pointing out, air has no jurisdiction. The more people recognize that their grandchildren who are playing outside, their nieces and nephews, their children, their loved ones are being impacted. They are all getting a result of these cumulative impacts of not only pollution, but also exploitation. As they're recognizing that they're all in harm's way, this will become more palatable and it will be desired more. So we're saying we have to be consistent with the reporting so that people don't only look for it when something bad happens. We have to create the appetite. We have to continue to educate. The more people are educated, the more people realize this is a coffee table conversation. This is a kitchen table issue. They will want to hear more about it. So I think, and our job here is to say that we want to be a resource to our journalists. Call us before anything. Let us let you know what's around, what should be covered, because when we're only called upon when there's extreme events, people are kind of desensitized to the everyday polluting things that are happening. And that's a problem. People only think it's a problem when there is a fire or when there is a spill or when there is orange smoke outside. And it's like, no, it isn't the extremes that are killing us. It is the incremental pollution that is building up our intake every day. The toxic loading that we're dealing with every day is what is literally killing us. So we needed to be a partnership with our journalists, a recognition that you do things based on clicks, but we also have to take responsibility of what we're clicking to. We the public, we have to take a bigger issue in our environmental issues to create an atmosphere where the journalists and the publications can justify doing more of these stories. So we all play a role, but at the end of the day, without accurate, let's say that again, without accurate reporting of the facts and the data, we're not going to get better. We don't get better by just printing stuff that everyone likes, because a lot of the things that everyone likes is just falsified and it's misinformation and it's hurting us. So as long as we can be a resource, as Anjuli says, we have the data. Just call us. We'll give you the data. Let's make sure we're printing accurate accounts, because anytime we're printing things that are inaccurate, we're giving people a false sense, because a lot of people take what they read as the law and as fact. So if you're not printing what's factual, people are going to believe misinformation and they're going to make detrimental decisions to the health.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. So I'm going to go to the next question. And I want to change gears for a second and talk a little bit about environmental racism and racism in general. And I'm bringing this up because this is a very important issue. There was an instance of something that happened last week, and I'm going to bring this up. I want to use this as an example, but I want to hone in on this very, very quickly. New Jersey LCV is involved in advocating for offshore wind, and we often talk about impacts to BIPOC communities, people of color, low-income communities, and so forth. We saw an example of this last week of a local paper covering a hearing in a predominantly Black community and totally missed the racialized undertones and questions asked by the opposition of offshore wind. Do you have advice for reporters on how they can effectively cover issues when race is clearly in the forefront? Like, it's an undertone, right? There's racial undertones. Like, what advice can we give for be able to provide to reporters to be able to handle situations like that?
Well, I'm going to let Marcus and Anjuli join in, but very sort of quickly, I want to sort of combine two things. So number one, the people in the United States, unfortunately, they have triggers when it comes to race communication in the media. They automatically feel, oh, they're leftist, they're biased, they're woke, or whatever ridiculous thing that people are saying. I'm sorry, I couldn't even say it with a straight face. But the problem is that, and I just gonna be real honest with, the three of us, the four of us on the call, the 75 people, the other 70 people who are on the call, people don't care about what happens to Black, Brown, Indigenous communities. They care at a function. They care, at lunch with their friends. They care. Oh, that's so terrible what's happening. But when it comes to changing their lifestyle, when it comes to making real change, these are not things that move the needle. And so we need to focus our message on things that do move the needle. And I know there was a question about engaging with nursing community. That's where we can get a lot of change, is when we talk about the health effects of these problems. We talk about the health effects, we talk about the asthma rates in Newark, and this air is not steady. It doesn't stay in Newark. It also is going to all these other areas. We talk about the toxicity. When we talk about the health effects, when we get engaged with those folks who are involved in the real health concerns, we talk about the gas stoves that Anjuli brought up, right? So the indoor air quality that's made worse by gas stoves is not on anyone's radar. We're not having that major conversation about the harmful effects of burning methane on your gas stove, let alone the additional particulates that come out of just cooking in general. It's like people wouldn't necessarily cook over an open flame in their home because they're like, oh no, that's dangerous to my house. And like a wood burning fire or something, like they wouldn't necessarily cook like that. We stopped cooking like that 100 years ago because guess what? it was killing us, right? We stopped cooking with coal. We stopped doing all these things. These are the health effects that we need to normalize so that we can get those touch points that people care about. I care about race. The people who live next to me in my Black community of Newark, they care about race. But those people who are, sitting in their more affluent suburbs who aren't necessarily affected by the everyday lived social, economic, educational, and environmental realities of racist systemic practices, not bigotry. I don't want us to be confuse racism with bigotry. Racism is not bigotry. Racism is not prejudice. Racism is our systemic problems that we have built into our legal code, that we have built into our land use policies, that we have built into the fabric of how and our economic systems. These are the racism that we're talking about. We're not talking about, oh, he doesn't like Black people. Nobody cares he doesn't like Black people. If he has power to stop a Black person or a brown person or a Hispanic person or his indigenous person from doing something, that's racism. We're not talking about bigotry, and we need to make sure that we keep that line separate.
100%, 100%. And only thing I would add to that is I hope people really internalize what Nicole said about we know that people don't care, and we need to be honest that people don't care. In the same state where we have multiple murders at the hands of police, what has been done since George Floyd's death, multiple bills, federal and state, how many have actually passed? There is a trend. The trend here is people don't care about what's happening to Black people and also brown people, but particular Black people. There's a history there, and we need to acknowledge that. We need to be very honest and frank about that. And so when it comes to the framing, and this is where our journalists come in, a lot of times the framing is based on, oh, this Black community. It's like, automatically you're getting people shutting their heads off. They're just turning their brains off because there's triggers and people don't want to face their stuff. So if we are focusing the energy on not only are these Black people, these are people. These are human beings. These are people who look like me except for their complexion, but all bleed the same. Everything is the same. These are human beings, and these are human beings that are being impacted unfairly. And it's not only them, it's many people. When we speak about Newark, I grew up in Newark. It's not only Black and brown people in Newark, it's predominantly, but there are people from all walks of life, all orientations, all ages who are in Newark. So we're just focusing on the health implications on human beings in Newark, letting that be the lead story. Then we can gather more attention, gain more traction, bring more people, make it a more inclusive environment. But the trend is always to, let's speak to this Black person about that. That may be beneficial to a small group, but if we're going to have a sustainable movement, we need to get more people in here, and we have to do better with that messaging. So I would also like to say, even in the midst of this conversation, I have to acknowledge that the journalists that I know personally who are on this panel, they have been doing this work. Like, we have panelists who have absolutely been trying their best to make environmental justice a conversation. But I recognize the journalists only have one job. They can report, but these producers, these publication editors, they have to be on board and support the journalists who want to write about these things, because we also recognize that's not always the case. But when it comes to the conversation about race, James, as you're saying, we have to just acknowledge environmental justice is a justice issue. It needs to be covered the way every justice issue is covered. And when there's an injustice, we need to cover it and make sure we bring awareness, but be inclusive. Let's bring the idea of injustice under one umbrella, and let's cover it that way. And I think we'll get farther, because right now, these little small victories that we have, like, let's get away from the ego. We need to be thinking about the people who aren't born yet, who need a better planet. And we have to make those decisions now and be more inclusive.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Anjuli. And thank you, Nicole. We will be moving into the Q&A portion of the first panel. And Vanessa will be showing you an interactive tool that she's going to put up And then we will be moving into the question and answer portion moving forward for this particular panel.
So I just put in the chat a link to slido.com, and you can join as a participant by entering the code. So right now I'm going to share my screen and show you how it works. This is the code that we want you to put in. Again, it's in the chat. The code is 2301672. You could also use the QR code. And what we want to do is, do some polls to get your impact, your opinions and your feedback. And so the first question that we want to ask all of you is, what climate issues are you most concerned about where you live? And even if you don't live in New Jersey, we know we have folks from Philly and from all over the country joining us, but tell us what you're most concerned about where you live. And so this is the first poll. We have 2 more questions throughout this event. And then after we're done with this Q&A, we can show you some of the answers that folks gave to us. See, they start to pop up, water quality, and you can be anonymous. You can put your name on there. And so we're seeing. So I'm going to let that run and toss it back to James so he can start the Q&A. And I believe that Joe has compiled a list of questions.
Thank you, Vanessa. So I will move forward with a question that I see in the chat. And I don't want to mispronounce anyone's name, so I'm just going to go flat out and just ask the question, which I think is a good question. What role does the government have in environmental justice reporting, if any? And do they help with providing data? So I think the question, the central question is there any data that the DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, or either the state more broadly in general, provide on environmental topics or issues, particularly, let's just use cumulative impacts, for example?
Well, truthfully, the state definitely, I'm using the state as the government. So the state does have a very important role to play. Number one, it's statewide. So I might be focused in Newark. I have very Newark focused issues, and they should have that bird's eye view as a state. They should be able to know from the DEP side what environmental issues and concerns there are. From our Board of Public Utilities, they should know about how the utility services are handled. From our Department of Community Affairs, they should know our housing stock and the realities of how people are living. The Economic Development Administration, they should know how businesses are being served and or being affected by environmental and racial justice issues. So the state in general has a mandate to know its state, to know what's going on, to be able to as the questioner put it, to have the data, to be able to share that information, and also to do what is best, not just for those who have means, who have the economic sort of authority to get in good with, the Senate president or whomever, but to actually research some of these issues, not just blindly put in legislation because they got passed a note or something like that. So we have the state agencies have a position there to provide data, to have that information, to have the sort of bird's eye view look, but also to make sure that they're the people who are decision makers know what they're talking about and that they are making informed decisions.
I just want to add one point to what you just said. Agree 100% right. Thanks to our environmental justice law that has now been adopted as a rule, the DEP has now the ability, well, they've always had the ability, but now they have the statutory ability to get all of the data that they accumulate on a yearly basis and evaluate those data points from a cumulative standpoint, right? So now our communities have the ability to go into their websites, the EJ mapping tool, it's an example, where we can look at, what types of facilities are surrounding our communities in the entire state. How many of them are they? Like, what are their permits? How much contamination am I being exposed to? And so thanks to the EJ rule that it's, coming into effect very shortly, we're going to be able to understand with better understand the cumulative impact of how much we're being exposed to across the state. And the EPA also has this responsibility to provide all of its data and all of these analyses to all states and to all of our communities. Unfortunately, the problem is that people don't really get excited to go into a state website or the EPA website, and so it is sometimes difficult to find information. So I guess it requires work from our part as well. But this is why, this is part of all of our works every day. It's like bringing all of that information and all of that data to everybody so that we're all aware.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say data is really important. A lot of times the narrative is that activists are just people out here complaining and it's just passion driven and there's no basis. But it's like, no, there is data showing everything that we're complaining about. There is data, and it's important for us to make sure that data gets to the forefront. So to the question, it's important for the state to make sure that data is readily available because it's a vested interest. It's in their interest to provide that data because the state makes investments all the time into clean energy, whether it's their investments in the offshore wind, investments in our parks and open spaces, and like there's investments all over the place. So it would behoove our state to ensure that that data is readily available to everyone so they can see, oh, we just gave X million dollars to this because this is what's happening. And the cost of inaction is going to be this much. So it's important for us to invest this now because later people need to know how that works. So I think it's really important, but this is why at NJPEEC, we're working on different initiatives. Like we have a guide to equitable access for environmental justice communities, because we want to educate people on what their states should be doing to ensure that the information gets to them. As Nicole and Anjuli has alluded to, people aren't just running to state websites to get information. We have to be much more proactive with ensuring that not only the data is getting to people, but it's understandable, it's palatable, it's not flying over people's heads, it's easily digestible. There's additional work that our state agencies need to do, but along that same vein, this is where our journalists will be an amazing resource if we can publish that data and get people to be able to give the layman's terms analysis of what that data means when it's not even an emergency. Just on a regular Thursday, let's have a conversation about what this data means. I think if we can start putting that into the news cycle on a more regular basis, it'll become a staple. That staple will become wanted because people want to know, hey, what is the air quality index today? I've never looked for that before, but now this publication seems to publish that every week. Now I'm curious. I have developed an appetite for it. So I think we just need to work a little bit harder to help people develop an appetite for data. And once people are hooked, they're going to be hooked forever. So I think that's something we can absolutely accomplish.
And just one thing, someone put into the chat about the data being problematic, data gathering being problematic. And the example was that Trenton wasn't seeing urban heat island effects because of the placement of the thermometer. These are the small things, right? That our advocates are very often, because they're on the ground, our grassroots people, they're on the ground, they see everything. And so we've had conversations with DP about air quality monitoring, placing your air quality monitoring a mile and a half away from the area of industrialization in your town, or not placing it anywhere near the influx of diesel trucks that might be flowing through. You're not going to get the kind of data that will help you move the needle so that we can see the results and see the investment in change that Marcus was talking about.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move on to the next question. And this is a little bit more of a general question. What kind of collaborations do you see necessarily to push forward equitable energy policies in New Jersey?
Wait, what was the question, James, again? Sorry.
What kind of collaborations do you see necessary for pushing forward equitable energy policies in New Jersey?
I mean, I'm always the one. I always open my mouth. So truthfully, I feel that people being on the side of right, joining together, we're not policing who joins the room, right? So we have people who are concerned about food deserts and food, healthy food access, combined with the nurses and the clinicians who are interested in health, healthy outcomes for their patients in the neighborhoods that they serve. We're talking about moms who are concerned about the health of their children who play on playgrounds. We're talking about business owners who want to make sure that their business is doing things the healthiest, most sustainable way possible. You know, so that those collaborations are very wide open. Of course, the environmental and the environmental justice groups working together, that coalition of partners needs to be very wide and broad. And so I wouldn't say that there's a perfect makeup, because whoever wants to join in needs to join in. And that includes our press coverage. You know, we want the press to be impartial and to speak the truth, even if their voice shakes. But we also want them to be people and live in the world and have opinions about things so that they know those important issues to cover. So we want to have a broad coalition, I would say.
Okay.
And I would say really quickly, James, like just a quick question to everyone on this call. We all know the impacts of fossil fuels. We all know the importance of having electric cars. How many people right now with your current salary, with the rebates that we're getting, how many of you can go out and buy an electric car right now? Raise your hand. So one of the collaborations we need to have is with our New Jersey Economic Development Authority to make sure that we have realistic rebates. We can't keep talking about what the problem is without making sure people can afford what the solution is. We are forgiving PPP loans left and right. We're taking away corporate taxes. We're doing all these revenue generating things. But when it comes to something that we can infuse money into and make things affordable for our communities to lessen these environmental impacts, we don't find that to be as something we should be doing. And those are things I think we need to write about. We need to continue to write about how we keep talking about how important electric vehicles are, but no one can afford them. And that is a fixable problem. Raising the amount of rebates that people receive for going electric can 100% be done. It just takes will. And I think we have to build that will organically. And one way to do that is through journalism, making sure that we show real people saying, hey, I have a family, I have a job, I still can't afford this. So if it's such a big deal, why can we put millions over here, but can't put millions here to make things affordable for our everyday New Jersey resident?
Yeah, I just want to chime in to say that I was trying to buy an electric vehicle and found out that New Jersey had already exhausted all of the rebate funds by the end of April. And so, of course, I was shopping in May and was not able to take advantage of those rebates. So that means for, you know, the rest of the 8 months out of the year, nobody is able. So as a journalist, I'm like, what happened to the money? Where's, you know, where did it go? Why does everyone still think that this fund exists? And so that's a story right there, right? Now it could be a success story or not, right? It could be like so many people took advantage of this well-advertised programming that the money is all gone. And now we need to advocate for more money, but I really couldn't find any information on why that was. And by the way, I bought a hybrid vehicle, but it was really, really hard to get a hybrid vehicle. And same thing, I was like, why is it so hard? What is going on? And the information just was not there. So I'm just echoing Marcus's call as someone who had went through that myself and having a really hard time understanding the disconnect between like advocating for lower carbon emissions and the programs and the resources and the product just not being there. And those are questions around accountability that we can ask as journalists.
I'm gonna tell you, Vanessa, what happened to the money is a question. that journalists need to ask more and more and more about every single issue. I could talk more about EVs and all that, but I know Anjuli was next up.
Yeah, I just want to say that I agree with everybody here, and that the press needs to focus more on those people's stories, so that, because everybody knows this in the room, or maybe not everybody does, government and agencies pay attention to what's being covered, and they don't necessarily know these stories from our own people in communities, because they're not talking to the peoples in communities every day to base their policies and regulations. And so I see it as a responsibility by the media to cover those examples and to negative stories or success stories, because that is what is going to influence decision makers into making things better for us. I lost my train of thought, but it'll come back to me. Oh yeah. Sorry, Vanessa, to what you said of you can turn that example into a positive story of there's so much appetite for people that the fund exhausted itself by March. Let's put more money into these programs. And so that story could have influenced, I don't know, the budget into this administration putting even more money into rebates or other new programs to help people afford EVs. And so it's the framing, but it's also, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
And
Yeah, or was the money siphoned off for some other reason, which happens a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
It does happen a lot. In
In
this particular regard, it probably just ran out. But to Anjali's point, it ran out because it wasn't enough to cover the demand, right? And also, Vanessa, what you're talking about is direct personal experience. And so somebody put into the chat, we need a narrative to frame, and that's just journalism 101, right? You follow all the data follows a narrative. And so that personal experience is one where you might say, oh, I tried to get an EV. The only ones that qualified for a federal rebate were giant, massive trucks that cost $60,000 for some reason, because they're Buy American, or I can get a Tesla. So those are my options with regard to getting a federal rebate. Who's having these kinds of nuanced conversations so that we talk about car culture, and we talk about how EVs are just a perpetuation of car culture, and that, the trend in the United States towards these large pickup trucks and SUVs has cut out a whole segment of kind of opportunities for people. Marcus was talking about people not being able to afford them. They can't afford them because they're gigantic. They're very heavy and they're giant, and they're priced to get the biggest dollar as opposed to be accessible. And if we want people to adopt EVs, we need to make them accessible. And there's a disconnect here in the United States.
I want to say that there's one affordable option based on the Fed's tax breaks, but it's just one. That doesn't necessarily work. It doesn't work for me. I have a family. I can't use that tiny car. But yeah, just to clarify.
And since the rebates are gone, and people like me, who are not rich, cannot afford those big vehicles, right? So I think that's the story there, right? It's inaccessible to most people. I want to thank all of you, along with James, for bringing these important messages. We are going to transition now to a break, but before we go to break, I do want to share my screen once more to show some of the feedback that we got. We'll put up more questions in the second half. And so let me share you a little. So once you type in your question, you should be able to see the answers. And so at the top, Slido starts to track the vocabulary, the words that show up the most. So we see water, right? Water comes up 7 times, air quality, impact, extreme heat, food, flooding, and pollution. And so if you scroll down, it's again, extreme heat and flooding, animal, agriculture, right? And there's just so much along with that. That's really, really important in terms of the ecosystems that are also impacted. Food and water scarcity, right? If we have droughts, if we don't have rain, that affects our food and water supply, stormwater management, property flooding, high temperatures, land use, open space, sporadic rain, poisoning of the air quality, sea level rise, coastal sustainability. Of course, I'm going through these quickly and I'm not doing justice to all of your really great answers. But I just wanted to document, right, where we are right now and maybe look at this in 5 years. Will this change? Would this have been different 5 years prior? I think we're at a really critical point in our history right now. And I think it's important as journalists, as documentarians, to document what is happening right now. So thanks everyone for your participation. I'm going to stop right there. We're going to put up more questions. And there's some questions that we didn't get to right now because we ran out of time, but we will have some time at the end of the second Q&A to bring everybody back together again to answer some of these other questions. And panelists, if you scroll through the chat, please feel free to answer questions directly if you feel like you can. And so right now I'm going to toss it to Joe from the Center for Cooperative Media. He's going to take us to a break and we'll be back in about 5 minutes or so with an